So, I'm not really a fan of vampires as a concept. I get the appeal in theory. They're supposed to be refined, suave, sensual, and dangerous all at the same time. They're likely to have the knowledge of the ages kept up in their sometimes pretty little heads because they've been around the block more than a few times in most stories they feature in. The lore behind them is well defined, so they're not too much of a pain to be able to slide into a writer's world building, and the lore is also kind of well known, so most audiences will be able to come into it having at least a working knowledge of what they're all about. And even though the lore is well defined, it's not rigid, given that they're generally also supposed to come with a perpetual air of mystique, and that allows for liberties to be taken based on what the story is trying to communicate with their presence. They're really very intriguing in concept, but in practice I mainly just find them boring. I don't know what it is, guys, but generally speaking, when I hear that vampires are involved with the plot, that's an automatic nope for me, and my interest in something is immediately diminished into almost nothing. And not for lack of trying either. I've consumed quite a bit of vampire media over time, and none of it has ever hit for me. I don't find them scary, nor do I find them interesting, nor do I find them sexy, and I damn sure don't find them romantic. And don't even get me started on Count Dracula himself as a concept. No offense to anyone who likes him and all that. We just have different tastes, but Dracula bores me to tears. Vampires, in general, just bore me to tears. Except for the ones in Castlevania. Hi, hello, welcome. Hope your day's going well. My name's Don, and today I'll be getting into my thoughts about the Netflix Castlevania animation, specifically the first season. Season 4, which will be the final season as far as I know, is dropping pretty soon, and I'm hyped for it because, damn, is this show something special. Spoiler alert, guys. I love it, and I have only minor critiques, so this is mainly just going to be me explaining why I like it so much, so if that sounds like your jam, then stick around and let's talk about it. I will direct your attention to the screen right now for some content warnings just to be safe. Castlevania is a dark, violent, and at times deeply pessimistic show, and it certainly won't be to everyone's taste. So take from that what you will and proceed cautiously and responsibly. I will be getting into spoilers because I almost always get into spoilers. And so this is the part where I tell you that if any of those content warnings I just put up don't perturb you and you have any sort of interest in this show, Season 1 is extremely easy to consume. It's very easy to watch. There's only 4 episodes, and so if you have any at all interest in this, I would recommend you watch that before watching this, because it's good. But either way, we'll just get into it. Still here? Excellent. Okay, real quick. Netflix's Castlevania is a Western animation adaptation of the story of one of the Castlevania video games. Now, there are many, many Castlevania games spanning a number of consoles and generations, but the one that this show is mostly drawn from is Castlevania 3 Dracula's Curse, which was released on the NES back in 1989 in Japan. Most of the major characters found within that game will indeed be found within this show. However, none of them are portrayed in quite the same way. In fact, they're extremely different at times. Though Dracula's Curse is the story that's first adapted for this series, it very quickly begins to bring in elements and characters of various other titles within the franchise, but that's a conversation for a different video. I'm not comparing or contrasting the show to the games or anything here, I'm just taking it in as its own work. But I wanted to provide the context that this is in fact an adaptation of a video game. Having that tidbit of knowledge is important because there's a few things that one should automatically expect from a video game or book to show / movie adaptation. Namely, a lot of exposition and at times confusing pacing decisions. Those aren't necessarily problems in the first season in my opinion, as it's obvious by the end of it that the first season is mainly meant to broadly introduce the characters, themes, and plot of the universe, and I think it accomplishes that goal very well. But the pacing and exposition does get kind of wonky in later seasons. Anyways, let's briefly go over what happens in the first season. The first episode is quite literally all about Dracula. It goes into his first meeting with his to-be wife Lisa Tepes, and the circumstances surrounding her being burnt at the stake for supposed witchcraft, which lead to Dracula declaring war on humanity. The second episode introduces us to one of our main three players, Trevor Belmont. If you're at all familiar with the games, the name Belmont will immediately stand out to you. Anyways, this episode is all about introducing the type of person that Trevor is, as well as giving us a look into the lives of the common people ever since Dracula brought the Night Horde down. These demons that he summoned, they're called the Night Horde. It's an episode focused pretty heavily on character interactions as opposed to outright action set pieces, and we come away from it learning a few key things. 1. The Belmont family was excommunicated by the church shortly after Dracula initiated the apocalypse, and because this land is governed by a theocracy, this also means that the Belmont family name has basically been intrinsically tied to the suffering of the common people, and thus they aren't the most well-liked people at the moment. 2. The church has also similarly persecuted a nomadic population of people known as the Speakers, and a lot of the common folk have adopted the idea that the presence of the Speakers is what prevents them from having their god's protection against the Night Horde. Number 3. According to the Speaker's stories, there's supposedly a warrior asleep beneath the town that is meant to be the key to defeating Dracula and saving Wallachia from the Night Horde, and one of the Speakers went down there to check it out and has not returned. 4. Trevor's a reluctant hero, could even be called a bit of an anti-hero, but he is, in fact, still a hero at heart. Episode 3 is where a lot of action kicks in, and much of the tension built up within the previous episode comes to a boil. Trevor goes down into the catacombs beneath the town to find the missing Speaker. He then kills the Cyclops, which results in the aforementioned Speaker being freed from her stone prison. This is Cypher Belmontes, and now we have 2 out of 3 of the main squad. What we understand from her rather quickly is that she's learned, headstrong, and compassionate. She also thinks that Trevor is an asshole.
I'm Cypher Belmontes.
I don't care.
Which, to be honest, fair. Anyways, Trevor reunites Cypher with her family, tries to dissuade the Speakers of the idea that there's a soldier underneath the town waiting to save them, because he deduces that what's underneath the town is very reminiscent of how he's read Dracula's castle described. He also tries to persuade them to leave because the townsfolk are planning to mob them and kill them in hopes that it will return their god's favor to them and protect them from the Night Horde. Trevor then gets brought to the bishop leading the town, whose faith has taken on a rather fanatic and unhinged edge, arguably. The bishop then tells Trevor to leave by sundown or he'll be killed like the Speakers. And we get this gem of a line.
Belmonts have never understood the power of the word of God. The people.
Trevor then goes back to once again try to convince the Speakers to leave. Spoiler alert, it doesn't work because they're wholly attached to the ideals of not leaving people in need. And then a mob of church thugs goes to kill the Speakers and finds Trevor instead. They do not win against him. Oh, and the Apocalypse Cloud appears. Yeah, they're here too. Episode 4 is pretty much non-stop action. The bishop's fanatic faith does not protect him from the Night Horde. Trevor is almost mobbed by the townsfolk, who up until now have completely bought into the church's propaganda about heretics and whatnot, but he's saved by Cypher, who, surprise, is a powerful magic caster. And he's able to sway the hearts of the townsfolk with some well-said words and admittedly badass posturing. He's then able to use his monster hunting knowledge to help the town defend themselves from the Night Horde, and he and Cypher wreck house with them as well, until they fall into a hole and land in a very fancy and technologically advanced keep. They navigate through it to ultimately find a coffin with, wouldn't you know it, a vampire. Or at least what Trevor assumes is a vampire. In fact, he actually assumes that this dude is Dracula himself. Then there's a very impressive action sequence in which both of these characters' personalities shine through even as they're trying to maim one another.
Please, this isn't a bar fight.
Have some class.
It ends in a draw that's not actually a draw because Dude Bro with the long hair was actually allowing these wounds to stay on him because he was testing Trevor. Cypher threatens to burn his head off, and then the guy reveals himself to be Adrian Tepes, or Alucard as most people know him, and thus rounds out our main three heroes because, hey, would you look at that? He was sleeping here waiting for a hunter and a scholar to combine his power with in order to destroy his dear old dad and save Wallachia, because that's what he feels like his mother would have wanted. And thus the squad is assembled. Trevor and Cypher are both just like, okay, fine, and then that's the end of the first season. So this first season works wonders as an introduction to the universe, but it's important to understand that it is just that, an introduction. It didn't bother me back when I first watched it in 2017, and it's not really a problem now with 3 seasons readily available, but I can see how the fast-paced and abrupt conclusion to these 4 episodes could throw some people, especially those who have no experience with Castlevania's lore. There's some wonky animation here and there, especially when characters are just talking at times. Dracula and Alucard's fangs can look kind of weird at times, and once you note it, you kinda can't stop looking at them. The animation during the fight scenes is fluid, with engaging camera work, great sound design, and interesting choreography. However, a lot of the hits lack a sense of weight and impact to them that makes moments less intense than I feel like they're going for at times. That all being said, I still think of the first season in an overwhelmingly positive way. Remember when I said I only had minor critiques? Well, those were them. Even though pretty much everything and everyone found in the first season is only explored in a sort of surface level, there is a lot of nuance in the way that they're portrayed, as far as voice acting, dialogue, and framing goes. As an example, we don't get to see any of Lisa and Vlad's life together, but their chemistry when they first meet is apparent enough that it's still believable and easy enough to fill in the blanks to believe that Vlad would really just lose it like this over Lisa being burned at the stake. Especially given the fact that the framing and dialogue very clearly get across the fact that he's long been disillusioned with humanity and that Lisa's presence was slowly starting to rebuild his faith in them once again. Having the first episode center on Dracula was a smart move because it's extremely sympathetic to him. We may not root for him or anything like that because, you know, extinction of the entire human race is objectively not a good thing to root for. But it's easy enough to understand how he could be so hurt and angry over the mob and groupthink-like mentality of the people of Wallachia, especially considering they do celebrate on the anniversary of Lisa's death. It's probably a mistake, guys. Anyways, it makes him a nuanced and interesting villain, especially when juxtaposed with the main 3. Much like Vlad, Trevor, Sifa, and to a lesser extent even Alucard, though that's explored more later in the series, all know what it's like to see the worst of humanity turned against them and their own. Trevor has been persecuted by the people he's given his life to protect just because he carries the Belmont name, and the people of Wallachia are very easily swayed by groupthink and complacency. He's bitter, hurt, and tired, but he retains a sense of duty and compassion. He outright says that he cares about protecting people at the end of the season, but that much is easily deduced just by watching him in earlier episodes. He's pleasant enough to the people who are pleasant with him. He can't let himself leave someone when he knows that they're in imminent danger. He goes out of his way just to prevent the speakers from being unjustly harmed by the church and townsfolk, and he makes the choice to help him protect a mob of people that had just been previously trying to kill him, all because it's what he feels is the right thing to do. Sypha embodies this speaker's ideals of helping others very well. She's proud of her heritage, as depicted by her absolute faith in the stories passed down by her people, and she holds a strong sense of duty to do her best to live by her goal of helping the innocents. She's a bit naive, which is not something that the series lets go unaddressed, but she has the power to make change happen at the same time. She's also one of the most creative elemental magic users I've seen in, like, anything in recent years. She's really great. We don't get much from Alucard this season, but again, what we do get is nuanced and layered. One of the things that sticks out to me the most about Alucard is that he never really proclaims to have faith in humanity. The only main character that has such faith is Sypha, really. at least from what we've seen on screen at the time of this recording. Alucard acts in the name of his mother's ideals. It's not clear in the first season whether or not he shares her sympathetic view of humanity and human nature, but it's deeply apparent that he has a great deal of love and respect for her and her legacy. He's very subdued, but he's also quick to get to the point. He's going to stop his father because he believes it's the right thing to do, no matter what his personal feelings on the matter are, and the reason he feels like it's the right thing to do is because the person he loved and admired the most would have also shared the same idea. It's not so much found in the first season because, like I said, Alucard doesn't actually appear much in it, but he really is a very good mirror and foil to his father, and the struggle between them already has the makings of being something extremely compelling this early in, even with the lack of screen time the both of them share. The main trio almost instantaneously have great chemistry with one another, and the first season really sets the foreground for the dynamics of their relationships to be explored further in the series, and that's all very well done. Trevor and Cypher are a delight on screen together, and Alucard very quickly slots right in, giving a good sense of anticipation to see where these three are going to go next. I really, really like this season, guys. It's short, sweet, and to the point, but the points it makes are fascinating, and the characters used to make them are compelling. That being said, there are some things to keep in mind when you're thinking about watching it or recommending it to someone. The show is very, very violent, and that does not change. It's also gory. Like, there's a scene where someone's eye literally gets whipped out of the socket, and you, see the eye go flying. That's certainly not going to be for everyone. The dialogue is fitting and feels right in this season, especially with the absolutely brilliant voice work. Oh my god, the English voice actors are spectacular. But the dialogue is also crude and vulgar at times, so just keep that in mind as well. It also portrays a rather cynical and fatalistic view of the nature of humanity, so if that's not your jam, then maybe steer away from the show, because it's pretty much always present and has actually gotten even darker at times in later seasons, and there hasn't yet been much balancing that out. And finally, if you're a practicing Christian, specifically Roman Catholic, and you have a hard time watching religion and the nature of the idea of God and the church being heavily deconstructed and questioned, you might want to steer clear of this one. I'm not a practicing Christian myself, so it didn't bother me at all. In fact, I found it quite interesting. But the church is portrayed in a way that might shake you a bit if you care about stuff like that, so just keep that in mind. And that's really all I have to say about this at the moment. I'm very hyped for the 4th season, and I'd like to go through each season and review them, along with a full series analysis exploring the themes and comparing it to the actual games in the future. But for right now, all I can say is that Season 1 is very good in my opinion, and if you think you can stomach it, I'd much, much, much recommend. Yeah, that's all for now, folks. Stay happy, healthy, like, comment, share, subscribe if you do so choose, and let me know what you thought below, and we'll be seeing you next time. Yeah. Bye.